Hey guys, Sam here. Welcome back to the channel, and as promised, today is a little bit more of a saucy one. Now, let's just get a few provisos out of the way. None of this is like advice or anything like that. This is a philosopher channel, and philosophy meaning, love of knowledge, love of wisdom. This is just knowledge or armchair theorising only. So none of this is to be taken as advice or something like that. But the topic of the video is why TREN is not that important, and I'm not trying to spoil anyone's fun here, but I thought it'd be a good one to address because it's a question that keeps coming up with people that are making inquiries with me or asking me questions privately. They want to know, if it's a good idea for them to be taking TREN. If I was to answer that quickly, I'd probably say, if you have to ask, then the answer is no. But I thought it'd be worth a video to explain my rationale, and hopefully you'll learn something about how bodybuilding's done properly and a little bit more sensibly in the process. Because at first I thought all of this kind of memes about TREN was funny, just a bit of fun, and sort of harmless. You see these social media personalities like the TREN twins, and I thought it was kind of like an internet meme, and we all kind of understood it as a joke, but apparently not, because you get all these inquiries like, should I be taking TREN? So unfortunately it's kind of not being taken as a joke and a bit fun. It's not like if I had my workout buddies and we called ourselves the Anadrol Amigos and it was just a bit of a laugh. It's now people have actually got the impression that TREN is the most important thing to be considering when getting up and running with bodybuilding, and it's just not. I mean, firstly, there's, not to be so boring about it, but getting your diet and training and everything else set up first is foundational and much more important before you consider taking anything hormonal or supercharging the whole thing. But you've heard that a million times. I want to offer a perspective that's a little bit more informative about the landscape of PEDs in general, because TREN was never a mainstay back in the day. If you look at the old literature, right, the name for it would have always been previously FINA, or FINA, however you say it, which is short for Finaplex, or Finaplex, which is pellets that they put in cattle. They'd implant a pellet and it would release the chemical, which was Trenbolone, but the product was known as Finaplex, or Finaplex. And then it was only really made into a product for cattle. It's a veterinary steroid, not a human grade steroid that was ever released as a medicine, except you may have heard of Parabolin, which was, I believe it was put out by Negma Pharmaceuticals, 76 milligrams per mil, but again, I don't think that was really intended as a human medicine. It was just a response to the amount of commercial interest that there was in these finer pellets, and it was withdrawn from the market, so you won't find Negma Pharmaceuticals Parabolin anymore. So that's just a brief review of when you're reading about these things, or if you're reading about these things properly, you'll sometimes hear about FINA or Parabolin, and it's the same thing. And excuse me, I'm actually multitasking. This is my breakfast, because this is the road to 300 pounds, and the eating rarely stops. So for me to get a proper chat in like this, I have to be having a meal as well. But far, far, far more important than TREN and Parabolin. It was used previously, but it was not really a mainstay of how things worked back in the 70s and 80s. Obviously, it was more human grade medicine. So when you're talking about human products, or products that were intended for humans, you're talking more testosterone, nandrolone, methanolone, which is of course Primobolan was the brand name for that, Winstrol, Anadrol, and so on. These are more the mainstay products that were intended for humans. So if you're thinking about TREN from the very beginning, I do understand that it was never really a human medicine. It was a product for cattle, and the idea of it was to make them hold as much lean mass and have as much lean mass for you know, food yield for profit.
Yeah, come
Hey! I see you approaching. I'm like, oh no, not again, because you get all this craziness. But why don't you introduce yourself?
Some special footage for the podcast. Come on, yes.
This is actually a talk about TREN.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Trenbolone.
Trenbolone. Yeah, I'm explaining to people why it's not so important. Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Have a good weekend.
Take care, man.
Yeah, excuse me. That's Andreas from Zone, and he's a gym owner that's been looking after everything at Zone, and always a good laugh. I seem to bump into everyone around here when it comes to bodybuilding. So as a guest appearance, that's very welcome. And yeah, shout out to Zone Gym. I may be later down there today. So on with today's topic, it was a veterinary product that's given basically to increase profits and meat yields, you know, putting and holding lean mass on cattle before they go to be slaughtered to go for meat products, which is, you know, that's more important to bodybuilding, meat products. But in the context of this, it's important to understand that it was given to be effective in that context, side effects be damned, and it's because of side effects and health implications that this product can't really be considered a mainstay of growing. You see, when I explain this to people, and this is the reason for making the video, is that now I can just refer to the video rather than having to explain the exact same thing over and over again. But when you look at bodybuilding holistically, what I'm calling like the four pillars of bodybuilding: the training, nutrition, lifestyle and recovery, and PEDs, those four elements or four legs of the table that hold the whole thing up. They work synergistically, and to be good at bodybuilding you need to view those four and how they interact with each other holistically. That's a lot of blather. What that means in this context is that something like Trenbolone, if it's making one or more of the other three parts of the process impaired, it's not very, very good for the long term. So you can't really stay on TREN for very long, because, to put it bluntly, it will fuck your kidneys, and if you fuck your kidneys, they're not coming back. It's also very unhelpful for other aspects like your appetite and eating, because it can give you gastro upset, acid reflux, that kind of thing, or just feeling not very good, having bad sleep, and these things mean that your progress will be impaired, because in that system of the four elements working together, the gains will only be as quick as the slowest part or the weakest link. So really, if you're trying to build muscle, anything that's going to impair your ability to keep on eating and eating over a longer period of time is not a long-term solution. So with TREN, after a while, you're going to get slowed down, even though it's going to be the quickest out of the gate, because it is strong. It's a little bit like the analogy of the hare and the tortoise, and we don't really know why the hare, in that story, we don't really know why the hare got complacent and kept resting and let the tortoise like slowly beat him in the end. But with TREN, we do know why it can't go on forever, and it's because it's really unhealthy, and you know, it'll slow down your progress by impairing your appetite and your sleep, and it will completely halt the whole process if you completely overdo it for far too long and damage your organs. So it is powerful, but it's actually silly. It's kind of overrated in how powerful it is, because it's not actually the most powerful. You know, milligram for milligram, things like M1T, that's methyl 1 testosterone, is stronger. Supertrol would be stronger, milligram for milligram, and then obviously methyltran would be stronger. But it's kind of like the strongest thing that you can use for a little while, and by a little while I mean maybe like 2 or 3 months. So where it really can fit in is at the very end of a contest prep, where you're not really looking to gain more muscle anyway. You'll be super eating loads and producing the strongest look for the finish, in combination with being dieted down and lean. More on that later. Or if you were planning a longer cycle and you know that there's an end point anyway, you kind of time the stronger parts of it, the Trenbolone, as the end part of it, where the point where the TREN is going to be not helpful anymore because it's ruining your appetite and making you feel not great, would be the point where the whole cycle was going to get collapsed down anyway. So it's just like a little sprint finish at the end of that very long run. So what that means is that for most people it's not really relevant, because most people are looking for long-term gains. They're looking to build a lot of mass, and that's going to take the time that it's going to take for how much food you can push through. So really the solution for those long-term gains is something that can be used higher for longer and safer. So other choices like basically EQ, Primo, and most of all testosterone, and most of all nandrolone would be much more sensible and effective at doing that over that longer period of time that it's going to be taking anyway, which can't be rushed because it's all dependent on how much food you can get through in the training anyway. So that's why it's not relevant there for most people. And then in the contest thing, most people that take these things don't even compete. And I'm not saying that they should, I'm not being elitist about this, I'm just trying to be helpful. And the look that it provides at the end of a contest prep, you know, is always going to be dependent on being dieted down, which most people can't do to that full extent. You know, the real look of being on TREN like depends on you being extremely low body fat as well, which most people don't ever do unless they compete, and even the people that compete mostly don't reach that point where it's really going to shine, really going to show itself to add in training combination with that and provide that unique look. So I've heard of people contest prepping and using TREN for months on end, but they don't diet strictly, and so they don't really look like they ought to, for including TREN. So what's the point? Now, some people will be more interested in TREN than they should be, because they think of it as a fat loss agent, so they sort of think that this kind of finished look of being dieted down and ripped and what it will make you look like will be assisted more by TREN than it actually will, because they're overestimating, you know, have greater expectations than is realistic for the fat loss aspect that will come with it. Now, the fat loss effects from TREN are a bit stronger than with other AAS, but with all AAS, the fat loss effects are actually minimal in the grand scheme of things. Things that are more specific to fat loss are kind of thermogenics, like usual albuterol, clenbuterol, more dangerous things like DMP, which is really not advised at all. Potentially GH, but that's not as strong as, say, Clen, which would be the standard. Your Himbine, ephedrine, other things like that are all a more pronounced fat loss assistance component than with TREN. But all of these things, you don't want to hear it, but the truth is all of these things are nowhere near as powerful as diet or even fasting for producing fat loss. None of them. So they're all extremely weak, and in comparison to diet, and actually most of them don't really work at all without having a diet in place that would have produced some fat loss anyway, and they just accelerate that. That's particularly the case with clenbuterol, but all of these things more useful for that than Trenbolone. So don't think that it's going to make up for your lack of knowledge and experience and effective program when it comes to the diet, because it's not. It's just going to assist that along minimally, and then produce a kind of unique, hard look to the muscles once you already have that extremely low body fat. And by extremely low body fat, to quantify that, I would say a skin fold of no more than 4 millimeters anywhere on the body. That's contest shredded. If you get to that point with the rest of your program and your diet alone, and then you take TREN pre-contest, you'll have the look that you're looking for. So I'm just trying to be helpful here, but actually that can be a safer way to do things, because it's very easy to get to that point without TREN if you know what you're doing, which is what a lot of the rest of my content is about. You get to that point, you actually don't need to use TREN for very long to produce the look that you're looking for. You'll have that look within 2 weeks. So there's no need for if you're doing it as a finisher pre-contest, there's no need for these huge long runs of it. You've got other AAS on the go that will be preserving muscle while you're dieting anyway. So, you know, other things like Trenbolone are extremely useful for that. And much healthier. And then with TREN for that finished look, if you need it, then just a couple of weeks. If you're using the acetate ester, normally you'll find that Trenbolone is Trenbolone enanthate, which would be what they would call a slow ester, using the slang there, a slow release, if you like, and TREN hex. I always forget the full name for that. It's like hexachlorocarbo, whatever. But TREN hex. It's not a swear. It's not as common as TREN enanthate, and then Trenbolone acetate would be the fastest acting one, where it's usually going to be 100 milligrams per milliliter, and probably used every other day or every day, so that's a little bit of a nuisance as well. But if it was TREN acetate in a contest prep situation, the unique look that you're looking for, you can just do 2 weeks of that if you're dieted down already, which the TREN isn't going to help you massively with. I'm sorry to say, you know, normal people that are looking at weight loss and getting in shape have sayings like, oh, you can't out-exercise a bad diet, you can't outrun a bad diet. But in the hardcore bodybuilding realm, I think a message that needs to be hammered home more often is that you also can't out-drug a bad diet. And I find myself saying that very often, usually to guys. Like when you're like giving a bit of advice to or talking to women about these matters, you usually don't have such a hard time of like unraveling like the drug excitement. They sort of instinctively know from day one that it's mostly going to be like a diet manipulation thing, and that's refreshing actually. It's usually with the guys that you sort of have to, you know, unravel and, you know, dismantle their false expectations with the drugs, especially Trenbolone, and explain that you can't outdrug a bad diet. And that goes for both directions, you know, for that cutting down I've just explained, but earlier on I kind of alluded to this matter of the whole gains program being as slow as the slowest part of it, which is probably going to be the pushing food, and so anything that interferes with the pushing food is really not good, or really can't be used for too long. So TREN, you know, fits into that category where it would only be helpful as a very powerful thing at the end of a cycle that was planned to end anyway. So the point at which it was going to interrupt the food process or make the food process difficult was the point where the whole thing was going to get collapsed down anyway. That's where it could fit. And it's a similar situation for these orals that are not great for appetite. So, you know, good for gains in the short term, but an interference when it comes to the longer term because of it all being dependent on the diet. So things like Dianabol, Anadrol, you know, shorter runs with those, like little plateau busting runs of a month here and there, with 5 weeks in between for your liver to recover enough. And obviously these things are confirmed by doing blood tests and checking the liver enzymes and that kind of thing. So you sort of see that this gets more complex. You know, when someone asks you this question, they're looking for like the magic fix or the quickest powerful thing or something exciting, and they've been misled by all the kind of memes that they've taken seriously instead of for the jokes that they actually are about like TREN and the whole landscape is a bit more complex than that, and bodybuilding is a lot more holistic knowledge than that, and that's how that all sits. And it's not me trying to spoil anyone's fun, it's me just trying to be helpful, it's me just trying to look after you here, because if you're like not so lucky, it won't even be enjoyable if you do take TREN, even if the results of it are more powerful and you enjoy that with your gym and your body. It can interfere with the rest of your life because it's notorious for some of the most nuisance side effects. So if you're having like sleepless nights, like night sweats, horrific dreams, anger issues, sexual dysfunction, including erectile dysfunction, you know, like people don't necessarily want to talk about these things, but I want to let you know because I want to help you here. You know, it's not it's not going to be. You're doing ultimately. We're doing this to like be happy and have fun. So if something in the balance of all things is making life less pleasant rather than more pleasant, it can't be a great option. So if you do find yourself prone to those sorts of side effects with TREN, which people do sometimes, it'd be worth readjusting your whole understanding of the whole picture and what would be more effective alternatives, more pleasant alternatives for your whole bodybuilding progress. No, I'm not just trying to be a killjoy or downplay the usefulness of something like Trenbolone. As I've said, it is pretty much the strongest thing that you could get away with using for a little while. But if you are one of those people that doesn't experience like any of the side effects I've just mentioned, the visible, obvious things, just know that it's not doing your insides any good. So that's another reason to limit use to a certain period of time, then stop, and then assess the situation. Maybe you would have a blood test, maybe you'd have an echocardiogram to check on your heart as well, as you can't see the state of the state of your heart health just from a blood test. And you'd have a look at it like that, and then kind of have your own kind of personal rules and protocol for how often and for how long you are going to use something like Trenbolone and how it sits. So it is used by serious bodybuilders. It is one of the mainstay things for, especially like pre-contest, but actually in terms of long-term gains, it's not one of the mainstay things because of what I've explained about how things have to happen over the long term, and its use for health and appetite would have to be limited anyway. So it's a piece of the puzzle. It's strong. It has its uses, but how useful it is and what can be expected from it has got massively inflated by the reputation that it's got, especially on the internet. And this didn't used to be the case when I started like learning about bodybuilding. All this like TREN thing wasn't like a meme on the internet, but I think now people are learning the wrong things in the wrong places, and if they're newer to this and have no personal experience of anything, they don't know how to differentiate between useful advice, sensible advice, what's just entertainment, what's just jokes by people that do have no experience. And I just thought that it would be a good point for me to make a video to really break down how all of that sits, because it's a question that I get sent or asked about. It's people that people want solutions. People want, that's understandable enough, and now I can just point to this video rather than have to say the same thing it's like all the time. And that brings me to the end of my exposition of what TREN's all about and why in the grand scheme of things it's not that useful. So I hope you enjoyed this or found it informative. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments. If you like this kind of content that's not afraid to tackle all topics that are relevant to this whole endeavour, then make sure you subscribe, and I'll be back online tomorrow. Cheers.